Chapter 24. We'll finish that up tonight. We may get into Job chapter 25. You know there's only 6 verses in Job 25. We will not finish all that. But, yeah. I better get it done in a week. In fact, we'll get some of it done today and we'll finish it up next week, Lord willing. Now, we left off in verse 20. And of course, you know, for the last, I don't know, it's got to be the last 3 or 4 or 5 chapters, we've been talking about wickedness. And in general, what Job and what the other men have to say about it is going to be true, but it's prophetical of what's coming. Your whole Bible is pointing toward that end time. If everything in the Old Testament, it seems like is a picture of that time, because that's when everything gets resolved. That's Revelations is when things get ended. This world system comes to an end. So you're seeing pictures of it, and you're seeing types of it, and in the first book of the Bible that was written is telling you about that time. And so he mentions there, we'll just pick it up at verse 20. It's been talking about the Antichrist. When he talked about verse 17, for the morning is to them as the shadow of death. That shadow of death in type is a picture of the Antichrist and in this world. And in verse 20, he says, the womb shall forget him. Notice now we've gone from they to a him and a his. The womb shall forget him. The worm shall feed sweetly on him. He shall be no more remembered, and wickedness shall be broken as a tree. Wickedness as a tree. Well, there are several areas in the Bible where wickedness is personified or pictured in a tree, even in an allegory. Ezekiel 31, the entire chapter is an allegory about the Antichrist being a tall cedar from Lebanon. It talks about how that the other trees in the garden envied him for his height. So, that bearing true, that the allegory bears true, that was a prominent tree in the garden. Okay? It was one that stood out. It's in the midst of the garden. Or is that the tree of life? It says it's in the midst. The tree of the knowledge of good and evil? I think it's in the midst of the garden, isn't it? Huh? Okay. So, I want to make sure I don't get them too switched around. So Adam and Eve would have noticed this tree. And of course they should, because God told them, you're not supposed to eat of that tree. At least he told Adam that. And of course Eve got it secondhand, but she was told not to eat of that tree. It says here, wickedness shall be broken as a tree. Well, then Daniel chapter 4. In Daniel chapter 4, Nebuchadnezzar has a dream. Nebuchadnezzar is a great type of the Antichrist because he's the king of Babylon. And in this dream, he sees his kingdom as this tree that just, expands and grows, and its boughs, shadow the whole earth. He had the kingdoms of this world. And then, of course, it all comes to naught. And some of it applies to him, but some of it's going to apply to the future. We'll look at Psalm chapter 37. Psalm chapter 37, and let's look at verse 35. Because David likens wickedness to a spreading green bay tree. He said in Psalm 37:35, I have seen the wicked in great power and spreading himself like a green bay tree. Now, my knowledge of plants and everything, I thought there was such a thing as a green bay tree. Well, it's kind of synonymous with something that is growing and spreading and humongous, and they think it was some type of, not a spruce, but with that kind, evergreen. Now, they picked out one, a laurel evergreen or a laurel something or other, and they said, but it doesn't really spread, it's just very tall. Then that's not the right one. I love these people, When somebody's telling you something from the Bible, and then you go look it up, and they say, oh, well, that thing over there, that coney, that's a rock badger. Okay? Well, a rock badger is not defenseless. If it's like any other badger, it'll fight anything on the planet. But something that is defenseless, that finds defense in the rocks, is like a rabbit. And that's what these, I believe the conies are. They're like a hare. And they can find, they make their habitation in the rocks. It has a defense to it. But they'll tell you something different, like Leviathan's a crocodile or a hippopotamus. If it doesn't match what it says there, you can dismiss it out of hand. They're just a bunch of ignoramuses for even telling you that. So I don't know what kind of tree it is. It's a big tree. It's sprawling. And that's what he likens wickedness to a spreading green bay tree. Turn to Mark chapter 8. This is where I give you something without giving you something. Because I don't know what it means, but I just know there's something to it. In Mark chapter 8, verse 23 and 24, and he took the blind man by the hand and led him out of the town. And when he had spit on his eyes, some people probably take offense to that. But if it's the Lord, he can spit, make clay, he can do whatever he wants. And when he spit on his eyes and put his hands upon him, he asked if he saw aught. And he looked up and said, I see men as trees walking. So there's something to that. For that to show up in the New Testament and to have those kind of types, but I can't tell you what it is. I don't know everything about that. Do you know anything about that?
I have a note here that says he saw too clearly the first time and he had to put some blinders back on.
Ah, I see. Yeah, that could be. He saw too clearly the first time. All right, verse 21. He evil entreateth the barren that beareth not, and doth not good to the widow, and doeth not good to the widow, He evil entreateth the barren. This is this evil treatment of some people. And what you're going to find out, prophetically speaking, it's evil treatment of people who refuse the mark. Just like we're going to have evil treatment of people who refuse the injections. Okay? Just a trial run, folks. They'll be evil entreated. Look at Matthew chapter 25. Matthew chapter 25, verse 43 to 46. Now, we've gone over this a lot. I just want to bring out one point about it. I'm not going to belabor it. But he says there, I was a stranger and you took me in, naked and you clothed me not, sick and in prison. I was a stranger and you took me not in. Naked and you clothed me not, sick and in prison, and ye visited me not. You see that? And then shall he answer them, saying, when saw we thee? And he goes on to tell them, when you've done it to the least of these one of my brethren, you've done it unto me. And if you didn't do it unto him, you didn't do it. Or if you didn't do it unto them, to him you didn't do it. So that's the salvation in the tribulation for Gentiles. But notice James 1. James is all about the tribulation. James is written to the 12 tribes scattered abroad. The whole thing is a tribulation epistle. Now, I'm not saying there's not some stuff in there for us, but it's mainly for tribulation. Notice James, 1:27. Pure religion and undefiled before God and the Father is this, to visit the fatherless and widows in their affliction and to keep himself unspotted. Look what I'm doing. Unspotted from the world. Unspotted from the world. If somebody takes that mark, they got a spot on them. And pure religion is go visit them, go take care of them, and keep yourself unmarked, or you're a goner. That's pure religion, brother. If you want to get right down to it, that's it right there. Pure religion is love thy neighbor as thyself. All right, go help somebody. And deny this. I mean, they know to deny false gods and images. Well, the Antichrist has got an image. Same time that image is set up, the mark's being passed out. So James is telling them, go take care of somebody and don't take the mark. Sounds pretty good. I got to thinking, in America, we got enough junk. If they were passing out the mark today, they'd be waiting a long time for me to volunteer to take it. I mean, a long time. I mean, I could exist quite a while. I think most of you probably, I mean, just selling the junk in your house, you could probably sustain yourself for a year. Huh? You ever notice that? We got more junk. Listen, what you throw out, half the people on this earth would be fighting over it. I'm serious. What you throw out, I've seen it. I've seen it over another. I've been to third world countries. Trust me, they will fight over it. All right. So he evil entreateth the barren that beareth not, doeth not good to the widow. Verse 22, he draweth also, and by the way, he is not visiting them. Those that are taking the mark are not helping them. They're not trying to relieve them. I mean, they've gone. Once you take that mark, you might as well be all in. I mean, get behind the devil, because you're done. You've sealed your fate. In verse 22, he draweth also the mighty with his power. He riseth up, and no man is sure of life. Well, if this is talking about the Antichrist, and it seems like it is, when it says he draweth also the mighty with his power, if we were going to look at some power that's going to be in the tribulation, have to be those 10 kings. Dr. Ruckman put it this way. He said 10 kingpins. Is bowling, are there 10 pins in bowling? Isn't that interesting? The Bible talks about an image in Daniel chapter 2, and it says a stone is cut out, and it comes down and it knocks down all those. Well, it's a 10-toed confederacy. Now, this bowling, all you're doing in bowling is believe in your Bible. Maybe bowling should be, maybe we should make it the Christian pastime. Because, that's the bowling ball is a type of Christ, and the 10 pins are a type of a 10-nation confederacy run by 10 kings, and he plows them over. Now, if you can't strike, okay, if you gutter bowl, that's almost blasphemy. But that's interesting. That's interesting. Revelation 17, verse 12 and 13, and the 10 horns which thou sawest are 10 kings, which have received no kingdom as yet, but receive power as kings, 1 hour with the beast. Now, I don't think it's 1 hour on your watch. I think he's talking about just a time, a portion of time, a short portion of time. It says, these have one mind and shall give their power and strength unto the beast. Now, there's something about this. These 10 kings are part human and part superhuman. Daniel chapter 2, this is the thing about the 10-toed image. And it says, Daniel chapter 2, verse 41. If you want to turn there, read with me. It says, and whereas thou sawest the feet and the 10, and the toes, I put it 10 above it, and toes, part of potter's clay and part of iron. Well, you know what you're like. You're like a clay vessel, right? Who's the iron? It says the kingdom shall be divided. There's 10 of them. But there shall be in it of the strength of the iron, for as much as thou sawest the iron mixed with miry clay. And as the toes of the feet were part of iron and part of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly broken. And whereas thou sawest iron mixed with miry clay, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men. And they shall not cleave one to another, even as iron is not mixed with clay. I do not understand that last sentence there. But it says they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men. Does anybody understand that last part where it says, and they shall not cleave one to another, even as iron is not mixed with clay? Any idea?
So mingle doesn't mean the same thing as Genesis 6 does. Mingle just means they're among them.
So they're not going to be half-breeds necessarily. Some of them will be men and some of them will be angels, and you won't be able to tell which.
I don't know.
I don't think it's a different.
Mingle themselves. Huh. Interesting. They should not cleave one to another. Does that talk about to themselves or to the miry clay?
They can be in the same church together.
It may be that they're going to, if they mingle themselves among us, the part that's broken is the human part. And they're going to be the ones that are dictating to human beings what they're going to do. I've always thought, after I realized a third of that host is coming down, I've always thought that men will be enslaved. I've always thought that. It's an invasion. Somebody who brought this up last week about at the rapture, we leave behind our blood. And these are, was that what you and I talking about it? Or?
That was just a personal discussion at my house.
Okay. And the one thing that these, if they want to come across as humanoid, the one thing they're going to need is blood. So maybe they're, as we're going up, they're vacuuming up the mess and appearing to be, I don't know. See, I say this stuff, people think you're crazy. But it's interesting that we have something, what we call vampires. I mean, they want blood. They need blood. And there's going to be a bunch of bloodless beings coming down here. A lot of those cattle, they're cattle mutilations. And one thing they notice, all the blood's gone. Well, who needs that? Who's studying that? I don't know. Anyway, so you have 10 kings there, and it says, he draweth also the mighty with his power. Notice it says, he riseth up. So when the Antichrist pulls a resurrection out of his hat, the whole world is impressed by it. It says, he riseth up. How does he draw all the mighty unto himself? He comes up from the dead. That'll get you some points with just about anybody that's left here. Right? Revelation 13:3, I saw one of his heads as it were wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered after the beast. Makes sense. He draweth also the mighty with his power. He riseth up, and no man is sure of life. Well, as we would say, the new hymn, when he comes up from the dead, the new hymn is not an improvement over the old hymn. It's bad. It's like a bad translation. The new hymn, well, under the new hymn, heads will roll. And no man can be sure of life at that point. You have a combination of the judgments from God, plagues, you have drought, you have Moses and Elijah that are just one plague after the other, pouring, as it says, as often as they will. Man, I mean, they're just laying plagues down left and right on this earth. Then you have the beast who desires to purge the earth of any believers, which will put every man's life up for grabs unless divinely preserved. It says, no man is sure of life. I don't think that's no man sure of life maybe this year. I think that's no man sure of life hour by hour. They're just not so sure if something's going to kill them. Because there's going to be plenty of things happening that could. We know from the percentages that the Bible talks about that billions die. And then there's, upon those billions, going to be more billions when he comes back. No one that's got the mark of the beast is going to survive the second coming of Christ. He'll kill them all. We will kill them all. All right. Verse 23 and 24. Though it be given him to be in safety, whereon he resteth, yet his eyes are upon their ways. They are exalted for a little while, but are gone and brought low. They are taken out of the way as all other, and cut off as the tops of the ears of corn. Now that one, I was like, what? What does that mean? Well, one thing for sure, I've got some corn growing right next to me. It's 9 feet tall. And the only thing I can tell you is before you can cut off the tops, you got to be in the air. So whatever's cutting off those tops of those corn is flying. They're not on the ground. You can't cut the tops of that corn on the ground. You'd have to be in the air. Anyway. Now, depending on who you make the personal pronouns, and this is where I have a real problem. I don't know who's who at certain times in this book, But depending on who you make the personal pronouns, you could read it two ways and it would still hold true. And I'm going to give you the first reading that Dr. Ruckman gives in his commentary. And it's basically this. His safety is that he has been given by God 7 years to do his dirty work. And he pretty much knows he has approximately, Doc didn't say approximately, but I am, approximately that long. Okay? Yet God's eyes are upon their ways. And then in verse 24, they're taken out at the second advent as the other nations are. That's how Dr. Ruckman reads it. But I can read it a different way. In fact, I did read it a different way. And it's just slight. These 10 kings, which align with the Antichrist, give him surety of safety. In other words, they've assured him that they're going to work with him. But like any dictator, he's paranoid. And it says, but he keeps his eyes on them, there's the paranoia, even though God has put it in the hearts of those kings to serve the beast. And of course, ultimately at the end, they're destroyed along with the others when the Lord comes back. So I'm reading verse 24 as he reads it. But it says they're exalted for a little while, but are gone and brought low. They are taken out of the way as all other nations, and cut off as tops of the ears of corn. Revelation 17, verse 16 and 17. And the 10 horns, which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore. This is where he turns on the church that put him in the position he's in. Because if Satan be divided against Satan, how shall his kingdom stand? He's got 2 seats. You don't want 2 seats of authority. It's either going to be in Jerusalem or Rome. Which is it going to be? If he says it's going to be in Jerusalem, it's going to be in that temple, that's the seat I'm sitting on, I'll destroy the other one. And he does. He says, and the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast. Now you got to remember, the 10 horns have been working with the whore. These shall hate the whore, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh, and burn her with fire. They're going to destroy her. For God had put it in their hearts to fulfill his will, and to agree, and to give, about to have a, and give their kingdom unto the beast. Until the words of God shall be fulfilled. Until the words of God be... I cannot speak tonight. Okay. These 10 kings are around. They destroy the whore. They're going to destroy Rome. But they themselves are going to be intact. And they are around to fight Jesus Christ at the second advent. So verse 24 says, they are exalted for a little while. That's in Revelation 17:14. It says these, reference to, well, you know what? I need to go over there and read an extra verse to that, or it's Revelation 17, look at verse 13. Verse 12, it says, the 10 horns which thou sawest are 10 kings. Verse 13, these have one mind, shall give their power and strength unto the beast. Verse 14, these shall make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb shall overcome them. For he's Lord of lords and King of kings, and they that are with him are called and chosen and faithful. So they're going to be around to fight against Jesus Christ at the second advent. Safety is the big thing. When Israel says peace and safety, then sudden destruction cometh upon them. There's going to be a time when they're going to be in league with the Antichrist, and they're going to believe that there's going to be peace. And then that's always when all hell breaks loose. And that's what's going to break loose. So somebody's trying to assure them of safety. And I think the Antichrist is he can't even keep his own. You got to remember, man, this guy, the devil started all the cults, all the religions, outside of the true one. He's helped fan these things. He's even created some thorns in his own side. One thing, you can say a lot about the Muslims. Not much good. But there's one thing they don't believe in worshiping, and that's idols, even though they do. That Kaaba, whatever, black stone over there, they march around. I mean, there's no greater idolatry than that right there, man. You know, the stone that fell down from Jupiter in the book of Acts. They worship that. They worship that stone. They can say they don't, but they do. There's a little portal you're supposed to be able to look into and see that thing too. That's where they had that stampede and people got trampled over a rock. You know, the black stone. You know, the one in, what's that show? How? 2001 Space Odyssey. Anyway, everything turns into an obelisk, a stone, and then you have this, and it's right around Jupiter in the movie. And you have this stone that's falling down. Where do you think they're getting all this stuff? Man, they're getting it out of the Bible. If you read your Bible, you wouldn't have to go to the movies. You wouldn't have to watch any of them either. But I tell you, it's funny when you watch this stuff, I know where they got that. I know where they got that. I know where they got that. Man, they should pay me. I could give them some of that stuff. I always thought they should make some movies about the tribulation. I mean good ones, not these corny ones. I mean some good stuff. But they won't do it. Scare people too much, you might get saved. But it says, these shall make war with the Lamb shall overcome them, for he is Lord of lords and King of kings. So it fits the text. Then verse 25, and if it be not so now, who will make me a liar and make my speech nothing worth? We'd say worth nothing. Here it's nothing worth. Well, it was not so then. But Job is speaking under inspiration about a time nearly 4,000 years in the future. A minimum of 3,800 years. But nearly 4 millennia into the future, he's talking about. Now, you could apply this to the wicked practically. And if we practically apply it, the wicked get theirs sooner or later. And it does not matter how powerful they are, their judgment is swift and permanent when it comes. That's usually what you see. Sometimes you don't see that. But Job is talking, well, he's talking about the wicked, but I've seen some wicked pretty much make it to the end and die with a smile on their face. But they're not smiling now. You can be assured of that. When I think of any man that's in fire and he's being tormented in a flame, that's good. I don't need to add to that. In fact, I feel bad about that. Let's go to chapter 25. Chapter 25. Bildad, Dr. Ruckman implies that Bildad was so overwhelmed by chapter 24 and Job's response that he just starts and he utters out 6 verses. It's not that it's not under inspiration. It's just that he's not too sure what he's saying. I'm not too sure what he's saying. It almost looks like a Calvinist trying to, just get in a jab for omnipotence, I guess, or what's the word I'm thinking of? Sovereignty. Thank you. Try to get in a couple verses for sovereignty. So Bildad responds with a brief reply. Then answered Bildad the Shuhite and said, dominion and fear are with him. He maketh peace in his high places. Well, I don't know what Paul's talked about. Was everything in that chapter was something happening on this earth. But he says, dominion and fear with him, with God. He maketh peace in his high places. And I'll bet he does. Does anybody know, I tried to find a verse, and I couldn't find it. A verse where it says that sin cannot dwell in his presence, or evil, or something about where God dwells, none of that stuff can be in his presence. Does anybody know of a verse? Oh, I tried finding it, man. I was doing all kinds of, and I said, I know there's one. It's like it's right on the tip of my tongue, but there's where it's at, on the tip of my, I can't think of what it is, if there is one. Now, I used to believe that familiarity breeds contempt. I used to think that was scripture. After searching for an entire month, I finally gave up on it. Now, it does say, withdraw thy foot from thy neighbor's house, lest he be weary and offended, or something like that. So there's something like it. Sometimes we get these sayings in our head. Some people have, on occasion, I'll tell you, I did this on occasion, looking at new versions. sometimes it's not the greatest thing, because sometimes the verse you remember or the word, I put a message together and then realized it's right out of the RSV. Well, at least my title was, and it was about something about having your head in the sand, and it says my brother the ostrich is what I named it, and come to find out that was the talks about being a brother to dragons, and I can't remember what else, and owls, dragons and owls, something like that, and come to find out that I had thought about the RSV put in ostriches. And I thought about an ostrich sticking his head in the sand, so I had this message, my brother the ostrich. So you got to be careful. You never know. Paul, he heard one of my verses. Where was that, at the jail? And I had copied it off the internet. And I didn't check it. I should have. I thought who I got it off of was King James Bible. Probably was the New King James or something like that. And it was just one verse, but still, Huh? Yeah. But you know what? The fact that he spotted, that's a good thing. The fact that you should be able to spot it. If I start misquoting something, Yeah. So if you can find something, let me know. I was going to say something else, but I can't remember what it was now. Well, I still want to preach that message. I just can't find a proof text no more. It said, I am a brother to something in jackals and in Job. I think a companion of owls and a brother to jackals. I don't know. But man, I thought it was a good premise for a message, My brother, the ostrich. Why? He's got his head stuck in the sand, but alas, that will never fly. And now we move on. All right. Verse 2, dominion and fear are with him. He maketh peace in his high places. I just talked about that a little bit. Dominion and fear are with God. It is safe to say that the only place where sin does not abide is where God is. Whenever sin arises, God casts it out of heaven. The third one. Now this changed, when I understood something like this, it changed my view of a chapter in the book of Revelation, chapter 12, and I'll talk about that in just a second. This makes outer space the home of all kinds of wickedness, because if it's not in his presence, it's got to be somewhere else. Look in Revelation 12. Look at verse 7. Revelation 12:7. It says, and there was war in heaven. I have always believed that to be the third heaven, where supposedly the angels are. But you got to remember that when Satan fell, he got cast out of heaven. And when these angels they're cast out with him, where did he send them to? Well, he sent them to the second heaven. They've been dwelling up there where he says the heavens are not pure in his sight. And also, there's two heavens where things aren't pure. Outer space and the heaven above our heads. Because he's the prince of the power of the air, the spirit that now worketh in the children of disobedience. That thing's above our head. So it says, and there was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon. Dragon fought and his angels and prevailed not. Neither was their place found any more in heaven. But which one? Well, it says, and the great dragon was cast out. That old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world. He was cast out into the earth. And his angels were cast out with him. So is that what happened? They're cast out. I mean, you say, where's Satan now? Well, he's in the deep, isn't he? He's not in the third heaven. He's not in the third heaven unless God calls him to come forward and present himself. Job chapter 1 and 2. Well, if he's not there, I don't think these angels are falling there either. I think they're up there in the heaven above our atmosphere, in the universe there. And some of them are even in the deep. And that's where their abode is. And maybe God just gets sick of living next door to sin and decides, you're going down. It's interesting that after the rapture, things start happening. You've got the church up in glory. We've got a personal vendetta against the devil. And it says, and Michael and his angels. Now, you know we get a body like the angels, a resurrection body like the angels. If you think we're not in that fight, I'm here to tell you different. They may not. Michael and the angels, the spirits that are up there, they may not want to fight. But when you and I get up there, we want to fight. And it says they're cast out. Well, where's he cast out to? He's cast out to the earth. So they're coming down from this universe, down into our solar system, down to earth, where he cast them down to. Job 15:15, behold, he putteth no trust in his saints, yea, the heavens are not clean in his sight. We're going to see down here in verse 5, behold, even to the moon, and it shineth not, yea, the stars are not pure in his sight. See, that's the host up there. Don't think that God is allowing the devil, a seven-headed, fire-breathing dragon, and those fallen angels to be in his presence. Again, I believe they've already fallen. They fell all the way back before man was ever put on this earth. Before Adam and Eve were ever created, I believe that third of the host fell. I just believe that now. Because they're not being cast out of heaven because they fell in the last 3.5 or 42 months of the Great Tribulation. They fell all the way back there. They've been up there. He's not just casting down the angels. He's casting down the devil. And I know the devil's not dwelling on the right hand of the Father. It's Jesus Christ. So I believe that that's where they're cast out of. Does that make sense to all of you? Now, you don't have to believe it, but that's just my opinion on it. I just don't think that mess is going on in the third heaven. And I used to say, war in the third heaven where God is? Notice that it doesn't mention God's presence. You'd think all he had to do is look at them and they explode. But this is happening. He says, get him out of there. Get him out of there. And Michael goes after him with his angels. See if I gave you the verses. But it says, and the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil, and Satan, which deceived the whole world, he was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. Well, he wasn't in the third heaven. He got cast out. Verse 3, is there any number of his armies, and upon whom doth not his light arise? Well, the host of heaven cannot be numbered. Jeremiah 33:22 says, as the host of heaven cannot be numbered, neither the sand of the sea measured, so will I multiply the seed of David my servant, and the Levites that minister unto me. But he's talking about these, the host, and he says they're armies. They're armies. Exodus 15:3 says, the Lord is a man of war, the Lord is his name. He's telling you that he's got armies. Now, armies plural. Dr. Ruckman mentions 2, or he talks about 2 armies. I believe there's a possibility of 3, just like we have an Army, Navy, Air Force. I believe there's the possibility of 3. God being a triune God just makes me think that there's going to be 3 armies involved in the second coming. So Notice that the Navy and Air Force are more closely related as they move through water and travel through space. I didn't say they got along, but they move through water and they travel through space. The angels in the church are the hosts that are on high. In other words, what's going to be in heaven at the time this takes place, we know for sure, is number one, we have the angels. I'm talking about the ones that haven't fallen, the 2/3, but we also have the church is present. Okay? But there may be a ground force involved, and that is Israel. Both of them, the church and Israel, are referred to as an army. I'll give you the two references. In fact, there's two in Song of Solomon. I'm just going to give you one of them. Song of Solomon 6:10, talking about the bride. Who is she that looketh forth as the morning, fair as the moon? That's what we're a type of. Clear as the sun, and terrible as an army with banners. Talking about the church, talking about the bride of Christ. Ezekiel 37:10, this is the resurrection of Israel in the valley of dry bones. So I prophesied as he commanded me, and breath came into them, and they lived and stood upon their feet, an exceeding great army. Okay? In John 18:36, Jesus answered, my kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, then would my servants fight, that I should not be delivered to the Jews. But now, that's the key word in that verse, but now is my kingdom not from hence. But one day it will be. And you know what's going to happen then? His servants are going to fight. I'm one of them. Paul said, a servant of Jesus Christ, so am I. We'll fight. That's mentioned also. Remember I told you about James being a tribulation context. Listen to James 5:4. Behold, the hire of the laborers who've reaped down your fields, which is of you kept back by fraud, crieth, and the cries of them which have reaped are entered into the ears of the Lord of Sabaoth. Sabaoth. There's a couple ways to pronounce it. Sabaoth. You know that's a transliteration of the Hebrew word host. I'm sorry. I went out. That is the translation of the Hebrew word host. So he's talking about the Lord of hosts there. And notice it's just the same context of the previous chapter we were talking about, of them reaping those fields and starving them to death at the same time. You have two different kinds of, you have two different kinds of animals that they're riding on. In Revelation 19:14, it says, the armies which were in heaven followed him upon white horses, clothed in fine linen, white and clean. Now, I'm thankful for that verse. I know that I'm going to be riding a white horse because I'm in heaven. I'm coming down with him. I'm going to be given a white horse. He's going to be on a white horse. But did you know there are white asses too? White donkeys. In Judges chapter 5, verse 9 to 11, look at this. If you want to turn there. Judges chapter 5, verse 9 to 11. It says, my heart is toward the governors of Israel. Do you realize that Israel will be the governing nation on this earth during the millennium? They will govern all the nations. Now, I realize we'll be kings and all that, but it's all going to be centralized in Israel. The capital city of the world will be Jerusalem. It says, my heart is toward the governors of Israel that offer themselves willingly among the people. Maybe have to do with tribulation saints, or maybe have to do with the prophets, I don't know. It says, bless ye the Lord, speak ye that ride on white asses. Well, that's not a white horse. It says, speak ye that ride on white asses, ye that sit in judgment and walk by the way. They that are delivered from the noise of archers and the places of drawing water, there shall they rehearse the righteous acts of the Lord, even the righteous acts toward the inhabitants of his villages in Israel. Then shall the people of the Lord go down to the gates. And I got to thinking about it, that maybe this army here is particularly going to be located for Palestine, for reclaiming the holy city. That makes sense. I mean, it's Jews on resurrected Jews on white asses going in, and they're taking back because the Gentiles have trodden it down for 42 months. So maybe that's what they're going to do. Okay, I'm going to stop right there. We haven't finished. There's another part of the verse. There's so much to everything they say that I just... Anyway. Any questions about what we covered? Because I know that's a chunk.